Dr. Elena Rodriguez sat in the corner of the university cafeteria, her weathered hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. Students hurried past her table, their backpacks heavy with textbooks, their conversations filled with weekend plans and upcoming exams. None of them paid any attention to the small woman in her 60s who came here every day at precisely 11:30 a.m. Elena preferred it that way. She had learned years ago that being overlooked had its advantages. While others fought for attention and recognition, she could work quietly, think deeply, and make discoveries that would have been impossible under the harsh glare of academic politics. The cafeteria buzzed with the usual morning energy. Professor Williams from the history department held court at his regular table. Surrounded by eager graduate students hanging on his every word about his latest research on ancient Roman military tactics. Dr. Patterson from archaeology strutted past, her designer briefcase and perfectly styled hair announcing her importance to anyone who might have missed it. She had just returned from what she called her groundbreaking excavation in Peru, though Elena suspected the work was more about photo opportunities than actual science. Elena smiled to herself and returned to her worn notebook. The pages were filled with careful drawings, measurements, and notes written in her precise handwriting. To anyone glancing over, it would look like the hobby sketches of a retired teacher. The reality was far different. 3 months earlier, Elena had received an unexpected phone call that would change everything. The call came from Dr. James Morrison, a former colleague from her Stanford days who now worked with the Guatemalan Institute of Anthropology and History. His voice had been excited, almost breathless. "Elena, I need your expertise," he had said without preamble. "We found something in the Petén region, something that doesn't make sense." Elena had known James for over 30 years. They had been doctoral students together at Stanford, working under the legendary Dr. Sarah Chen, one of the few women to make a name for herself in Maya studies during the 1970s. James had gone on to become a respected field archaeologist, while Elena had chosen a different path. After completing her doctorate with highest honors, Elena had surprised everyone by accepting a position at a small community college instead of pursuing the prestigious university appointments that were offered to her. Her colleagues had whispered that she was wasting her talent, that someone with her brilliance should be leading major expeditions and publishing groundbreaking papers. What they didn't understand was that Elena had made a conscious choice. She had watched too many brilliant scholars burn out in the pressure cooker of academic competition. She had seen promising researchers abandon their love of discovery in favor of chasing grants and publications. Elena wanted something different. At Riverside Community College, she taught Introduction to Anthropology to students who were taking their first tentative steps into higher education. Many of them were older students returning to school after years in the workforce. Others were young people from families where no one had ever attended college. Elena found more joy in watching a single mother of 3 finally understand the concept of carbon dating than she had ever felt presenting papers to rooms full of professors trying to pick apart her work. But Elena never stopped being a researcher. Every summer she would disappear for 2 months, telling her colleagues she was visiting family in Mexico. In reality, she was conducting her own fieldwork in remote areas of the Maya world, following hunches and theories that the academic establishment considered too risky or unconventional to fund. Over the years, she had made several minor discoveries that she quietly shared with trusted colleagues. A previously unknown settlement here, evidence of an unexpected trade route there. Nothing that would make headlines, but contributions that slowly and steadily added to the understanding of Maya civilization. James's phone call had been different, though. He had sent her photographs that made her breath catch in her throat. The images showed carved stone blocks, clearly Maya in origin, but unlike anything in the archaeological record. The symbols were familiar, yet wrong, like a language she knew being spoken with an accent she had never heard before. "The local team is stumped," James had explained. The carbon dating suggests these artifacts are from the late Classic period, around 800 CE. But the iconography, Elena, it's showing astronomical alignments that shouldn't have been known for another 3 centuries. Either our dating is wrong, or we're looking at evidence of Maya knowledge that completely changes our understanding of their scientific capabilities. Elena had agreed to review the materials, expecting to spend a few weeks analyzing the photographs and providing some insights. She had not expected to become obsessed. For 3 months now, she had spent every free moment studying the images, cross-referencing them with every Maya codex and inscription database available. She had reached out to contacts across Central America, carefully asking questions without revealing why she needed the information. Slowly, a picture had begun to emerge that both thrilled and terrified her. The astronomical alignments carved into these stones were not just accurate for the 9th century CE. They were predictions, mathematical calculations that extended centuries into the future with a precision that rivaled modern computer models. If Elena's analysis was correct, these artifacts represented a level of astronomical knowledge that archaeology had never credited to the ancient Maya. But there was more. Hidden within the complex iconography were references to other sites, other caches of knowledge. The stones weren't just displaying astronomical data. They were a map, a guide to finding additional sources of Maya scientific achievement. Elena looked around the cafeteria again, watching her colleagues go about their daily routines. Dr. Patterson was now loudly describing her media interviews about her Peru expedition. Professor Williams was sketching battle formations on napkins for his students. None of them had any idea that one of the most significant archaeological discoveries of the century was being analyzed by a community college instructor sitting alone in the corner. The irony wasn't lost on Elena. She had spent her career being underestimated, overlooked, and marginalized. Tomorrow, she was flying to Guatemala to begin excavations that could rewrite textbooks and establish her as one of the leading Maya scholars in the world. The quiet lady in the corner was about to shock them all. Her phone buzzed with a text from James. "Flight confirmed for tomorrow. Team assembled. Are you ready for this?" Elena smiled and typed back, "Ready." She wasn't just ready. She was prepared in ways that her more famous colleagues could never be. While they had been fighting for recognition and building their reputations, Elena had been building something more valuable, a deep, intuitive understanding of Maya culture that came from decades of patient study without the pressure of publish or perish academic deadlines. Elena had learned to read Maya hieroglyphs not just as symbols to be decoded, but as the thoughts and dreams of a sophisticated civilization. She had studied their agricultural techniques, their trade networks, their religious beliefs, and their scientific achievements with the dedication of someone who truly loved her subject rather than someone trying to make a career from it. The other advantage Elena possessed was her invisibility. While famous archaeologists attracted media attention and government oversight that could complicate excavations, Elena could work quietly and thoroughly. Local communities that might be suspicious of foreign academics often welcomed the humble teacher who spoke fluent Spanish and showed genuine respect for their cultural heritage. Elena closed her notebook and gathered her belongings. Tomorrow would begin what she suspected would be the most important work of her life. The stones that James had found were just the beginning. If her theories were correct, they would lead to discoveries that would force the archaeological community to completely reconsider their understanding of Maya scientific achievement. As she walked across campus to her afternoon class, Elena reflected on the strange turns her life had taken. 40 years ago, fresh out of Stanford with her doctorate, she had been offered positions at Harvard, Yale, and Berkeley. Her professors had told her she was destined for greatness, that her insights into Maya culture were revolutionary. Instead, she had chosen obscurity. She had chosen to teach Introduction to Anthropology to students who struggled with the basic concepts she had mastered in graduate school. Her Stanford classmates had probably assumed she had failed to live up to her early promise. Tomorrow, she would begin proving them all wrong. Elena reached her classroom and found her students already seated, notebooks out, waiting for today's lecture on cultural diffusion. As she began to speak about how ideas and technologies spread between ancient civilizations, she couldn't help but think about the Maya astronomical knowledge she would be investigating in just 24 hours. Her students listened attentively as she explained how archaeological evidence could reveal unexpected connections between distant cultures. None of them realized they were getting a preview of discoveries that would soon make international headlines. The most important lesson in archaeology, Elena told her class, is to never underestimate ancient peoples. What we call primitive civilizations often possessed knowledge and capabilities that surprise modern researchers. The key is approaching the evidence with an open mind and a respect for the intelligence of our ancestors. One student raised her hand. Professor Rodriguez, what's the most surprising discovery archaeologists have made about ancient knowledge? Elena paused, thinking about the calculations hidden in the Maya stones she had been studying. That's an excellent question, Maria. I think you'd be amazed by what ancient peoples were capable of. In fact, I suspect some of the most surprising discoveries are still waiting to be made. After class, Elena returned to her office and opened her laptop to review her research one final time. The evidence was solid, the theories were sound, and the potential implications were staggering. Tomorrow would begin the most important excavation of her career, and possibly one of the most significant archaeological investigations of the modern era. The quiet lady, sitting alone, was about to change everything anyone thought they knew about Maya civilization. And she was going to do it her way, with careful scholarship, respectful collaboration, and a deep love for the ancient culture she had spent her life studying. Elena Rodriguez was ready to shock them all. The humid air of Guatemala's Petén region hit Elena like a warm embrace as she stepped off the small plane at Flores Airport. After hours of travel from California, she felt more energized than tired. This jungle, with its dense canopy and mysterious ruins hidden beneath centuries of growth, had always felt like home to her. James Morrison was waiting near the baggage claim, his familiar grin splitting his tanned face. 25 years of fieldwork in Central America had turned the pale graduate student Elena remembered into a weathered explorer who looked completely at ease in khaki field clothes and worn boots. "Elena, you haven't aged a day," he said, pulling her into a bear hug. "Still making the rest of us look bad with that sharp mind of yours." "Flattery will get you everywhere." "James," Elena replied, shouldering her field pack. She had traveled light, bringing only the essential equipment and the notebooks filled with her preliminary analysis. "Now, show me these impossible stones that have been keeping me awake at night." The drive to the excavation site took 3 hours through increasingly rough terrain. Elena watched the landscape change from cleared farmland to dense jungle, her excitement building with each mile. James briefed her on the team he had assembled. Dr. Ana Gutierrez, a local archaeologist who knew the region better than anyone. Miguel Santos, a graduate student from the University of San Carlos, whose careful excavation techniques had uncovered the initial artifacts, and Carlos Ixchel, a Maya descendant whose traditional knowledge had proven invaluable in interpreting some of the cultural context. Ana found the first stone completely by accident, James explained as their jeep bounced through a particularly rough patch of road. "The team was investigating what we thought was a minor ceremonial platform when her shovel hit carved stone about 3 feet down. What we uncovered next? Well, you'll see." Elena nodded, her mind already racing with possibilities. Accidental discoveries often turned out to be the most significant. When archaeologists weren't actively looking for something specific, they were more likely to recognize evidence that didn't fit their preconceptions. The excavation camp consisted of several canvas tents arranged around a central cooking area where smoke rose from a small fire. The site itself was marked by a series of carefully gridded squares, some covered with tarps to protect exposed artifacts from the afternoon rains that came like clockwork in this region. Dr. Ana Gutierrez emerged from the largest tent as their jeep pulled up. She was a compact woman in her 40s, with intelligent dark eyes and hands that bore the calluses of decades spent carefully brushing dirt from ancient treasures. "Dr. Rodriguez," Ana said in accented English, then switched to fluid Spanish. "James has told me so much about your work. I've read your papers on Maya agricultural systems. Your analysis of terracing techniques in the Puyuk region was brilliant." Elena was surprised and pleased that Ana knew her published work. Most of Elena's papers had appeared in smaller journals, focused on practical archaeological techniques rather than the high-profile publications that built academic reputations. It was refreshing to meet someone who valued solid research over flashy theories. "Please call me Elena, and I'm honored to work with someone who knows this region so intimately. Your preservation of traditional Maya knowledge practices is exactly what archaeology needs more of." Miguel Santos, barely 25 years old but already showing the careful attention to detail that made a good archaeologist, led Elena to the main excavation area. Carlos Ixchel joined them, his weathered face reflecting both curiosity and something Elena recognized as protective concern for his ancestral heritage. "Before we show you the stones," Carlos said in perfect English, "I want you to understand something. My grandfather told stories about this place, stories the academic community has always dismissed as folklore. But these discoveries, they match things my people have always known." Elena stopped walking and gave Carlos her full attention. Too many archaeologists ignored indigenous knowledge, treating local people as laborers rather than partners in understanding the past. Elena had learned early in her career that traditional oral histories often contained accurate information that had been preserved for centuries. "I would be honored to hear what your grandfather taught you," Elena said, "and I hope you'll feel comfortable sharing anything that might help us understand what we're finding here." Carlos nodded approvingly. "My grandfather said this place was where the Star Watchers kept their greatest secrets, not just observations but calculations that stretched far into the future. He said they could predict eclipses and planetary alignments hundreds of years before they happened." Ana pulled back the tarp covering the main excavation area, revealing what had brought Elena halfway around the world. The carved stones were arranged in a rough circle, each about 3 feet square and covered with intricate hieroglyphic inscriptions. But these weren't random religious texts or historical records. Elena could see immediately that they were sophisticated astronomical calculations, more complex than anything previously attributed to Maya science. Elena knelt beside the nearest stone, pulling out her magnifying glass and notebook. The glyphs were crisp and clear, protected by centuries of burial from the weathering that destroyed so many Maya inscriptions. As she began to read, her excitement grew. "James, this is extraordinary," she said without looking up from the stone. "This isn't just astronomical observation. These are predictive models. Look here." She pointed to a series of calculations that would have taken modern computers to verify. "They're calculating the orbital period of Venus with an accuracy that wasn't achieved by European astronomers until the telescope was invented." Miguel leaned in closer, trying to follow Elena's interpretation. How could they be so precise without modern instruments? "That's what we're going to find out," Elena replied, moving to examine the second stone. This one showed even more complex calculations, including what appeared to be predictions for solar eclipses extending hundreds of years into the future. "Ana, How far down does this extend? Is there more below what we've uncovered? That's what we need your expertise to determine, Anna replied. The ground-penetrating radar suggests there are additional stone structures below these. Possibly many more. But we wanted your analysis before excavating further. Elena spent the next 3 hours examining each exposed stone, taking detailed photographs and making careful notes of every glyph, every number, every astronomical symbol. As the sun began to set through the jungle canopy, painting the excavation in golden light, Elena felt the familiar thrill that came with a truly significant discovery. "James," she said finally, "we need to talk privately." They walked away from the excavation area to a small clearing where they could speak without being overheard. Elena's expression was serious, almost troubled. "What I'm seeing here changes everything we know about Maya scientific achievement," Elena began. "These calculations aren't just accurate. They're sophisticated in ways that suggest a level of astronomical knowledge that rivals modern science. But that's not what worries me." James frowned. "What do you mean?" Elena pulled out her notebook and showed him a series of symbols she had copied from the stones. "These glyphs don't just record astronomical data. They're instructions, directions to other sites. This place isn't a repository of knowledge. It's a map to a network of knowledge repositories." "A network?" "Think about it," Elena continued, her voice growing more animated as the implications sank in. The Maya never had a unified empire like the Romans or the Aztecs. They were city-states that traded and fought with each other. But what if they had something else? What if they had a scientific network that transcended political boundaries? A shared system for preserving and advancing astronomical knowledge? James sat down heavily on a fallen log. "You're talking about a scientific collaboration that spanned the entire Maya world." "I'm talking about something that could rewrite our understanding of how scientific knowledge developed in the ancient world," Elena replied. "These stones aren't just showing us what one group of Maya astronomers knew. They're showing us evidence of a sophisticated information network that may have preserved scientific knowledge through the collapse of entire civilizations." The implications were staggering. If Elena was correct, archaeologists had been looking at Maya achievements all wrong. Instead of isolated city-states occasionally sharing knowledge, they were dealing with evidence of a deliberate, organized scientific tradition that had preserved and advanced astronomical knowledge over centuries. "Elena," James said quietly, "if you're right about this, it's going to cause an earthquake in Maya studies. People have built entire careers on the assumption that Maya scientific achievement was limited by their political fragmentation." "I know," Elena replied, "but we have to follow the evidence wherever it leads. These stones are telling us that Maya astronomers were more sophisticated than anyone has ever imagined, and if the pattern I'm seeing is correct, this site is going to lead us to others." They rejoined the team at the campfire, where Anna was preparing a dinner of rice, beans, and fresh fruit. The conversation was animated as everyone shared their observations from the day's work. Elena was impressed by the team's expertise and dedication. Miguel asked thoughtful questions about hieroglyphic interpretation that showed real promise for advanced study. Carlos contributed insights from traditional knowledge that provided context the academic team would have missed. As the evening progressed, Elena felt the familiar satisfaction of working with people who shared her passion for understanding the past. This was what archaeology should be: collaborative, respectful, and focused on expanding human knowledge rather than advancing personal careers. "Tomorrow," Anna announced, "we'll begin exposing the lower level. Elena's analysis suggests we're looking at the tip of something much larger." Elena nodded, but privately she was already planning beyond tomorrow's excavation. The symbols she had documented today included references to sites she recognized from her decades of studying Maya geography. If her interpretation was correct, they were about to embark on an investigation that would take them across Guatemala, Mexico, and possibly Honduras and Belize. That night, Elena lay in her tent listening to the sounds of the jungle and reviewing her notes by flashlight. The evidence was overwhelming. The Maya had achieved a level of astronomical sophistication that archaeology had never credited them with. More importantly, they had created a network for preserving and sharing that knowledge that had survived political upheavals, wars, and even the collapse of major cities. Elena smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow would begin the next phase of the most important discovery of her career. The quiet lady sitting alone in the university cafeteria was about to prove that the Maya were far more scientifically advanced than anyone had ever dared imagine. But Elena also felt the weight of responsibility that came with such knowledge. This discovery would attract international attention, bring funding and recognition, and probably launch her into the kind of academic prominence she had spent her career avoiding. The question was whether she could manage that attention in a way that served the science rather than destroying it. As she drifted off to sleep, Elena's last thought was of her students back at Riverside Community College. Soon, she would have discoveries that would make their textbooks obsolete. The ancient Maya weren't just skilled astronomers. They were sophisticated scientists whose achievements had been hidden in plain sight for over 1,000 years. The quiet lady was about to change the world. 6 months after Elena first arrived at the Guatemala excavation site, she stood before a packed auditorium at Harvard University, looking out at an audience that included some of the most respected archaeologists in the world. The same colleagues who had once pitied her career choices now hung on her every word. The transformation had begun 3 weeks into the Guatemala expedition, when Elena's interpretation of the stone symbols led the team to a second site 40 kilometers away. That location had yielded not just more astronomical calculations, but evidence of an entire complex dedicated to advanced Maya science. Underground chambers contained carved walls showing mathematical concepts that European scholars wouldn't discover until the Renaissance. Dr. Patricia Harrison, Elena's former Stanford classmate who now headed the Maya Studies department at Yale, sat in the front row. Elena remembered Patricia's condescending comments 20 years ago about wasting talent at a community college. Today, Patricia was frantically taking notes as Elena presented discoveries that would reshape Maya archaeology forever. The network we've uncovered spans over 1,500 square kilometers, Elena explained, clicking to a map showing the connected sites. Each location specialized in different aspects of astronomical science. Site A focused on planetary calculations. Site B concentrated on eclipse prediction. Site C developed mathematical models for long-term calendar systems. But they weren't working in isolation. Elena clicked to the next slide, showing symbols that appeared at multiple sites. These standardized notation systems prove that Maya astronomers were sharing information across political boundaries. We're looking at evidence of scientific collaboration on a scale that archaeology has never documented in the ancient Americas. Dr. Robert Chen, the current director of the Smithsonian's Maya Research Program, raised his hand. Elena recognized him from conferences where he had presented theories about Maya limitations that her discoveries were now proving completely wrong. Dr. Rodriguez, he said, the precision you're documenting in these calculations exceeds anything we've attributed to ancient American cultures. How can we be certain these inscriptions are authentic? Elena had been expecting this challenge. Extraordinary claims required extraordinary evidence, and she had spent months assembling proof that would satisfy even the most skeptical researchers. Dr. Chen, I appreciate your caution, Elena replied. Carbon dating from organic materials found sealed within the stone chambers confirms dates between 780 and 820 CE. More importantly, the astronomical predictions carved in these stones have been verified by modern computer models. The Maya were predicting solar eclipses for the year 1991 with accuracy that differs from NASA calculations by less than 2 hours. The auditorium fell silent. Elena could see the implications sinking in as 200 of the world's leading archaeologists realized that their basic assumptions about ancient Maya capabilities had been completely wrong. Elena continued her presentation, describing how the network appeared to have preserved astronomical knowledge through the collapse of major Maya centers during the 9th century. While cities fell and populations scattered, the scientific community maintained its work, carefully protecting calculations and observations that represented centuries of accumulated knowledge. The most remarkable discovery, Elena said, clicking to a photograph of the most recent excavation, came from Site D, which we opened just 6 weeks ago. The image showed a circular chamber with walls covered in mathematical calculations that made even the previous discoveries look simple. Elena had spent 3 weeks working 18-hour days to decipher what the Maya astronomers had achieved. This chamber contains calculations for the orbital mechanics of all visible planets, accurate to within margins that weren't achieved by European astronomers until the invention of precision telescopes. But more than that, it shows evidence that Maya mathematicians had developed concepts equivalent to what we now call calculus. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a respected Maya epigrapher from Mexico's National University, stood up from her seat. Elena, what you're suggesting would mean that mathematical concepts we credit to Newton and Leibniz were actually developed by Maya scholars over 600 years earlier. That's exactly what I'm suggesting, Elena replied, and I have the inscriptions to prove it. Elena spent the next hour presenting evidence that systematically dismantled decades of academic assumptions. The Maya hadn't just been skilled astronomers and mathematicians. They had been sophisticated scientists whose achievements in several fields exceeded anything Europeans would accomplish until the scientific revolution. During the question period that followed, Elena faced challenges from researchers whose careers had been built on now outdated theories about Maya limitations. She answered each question with patience and evidence, demonstrating the same careful scholarship that had guided her work for 30 years. Dr. Margaret Phillips from UCLA asked the question Elena had been hoping someone would raise. Dr. Rodriguez, your background is somewhat unusual for someone making discoveries of this magnitude. How did your experience at a community college prepare you for this kind of groundbreaking research? Elena smiled. This was the moment she had been waiting for. Professor Phillips, I think my background was exactly what prepared me for these discoveries, Elena replied. While many of my colleagues were focused on advancing their careers and publishing papers that fit existing theories, I spent 30 years studying Maya culture for the pure love of understanding it. I wasn't constrained by academic politics or pressure to support fashionable interpretations. Elena paused, looking out at the audience of colleagues who had once dismissed her career choices. More importantly, my work at Riverside Community College taught me to communicate with people from different backgrounds and to value knowledge wherever I found it. Carlos Ixchel, whose grandfather's stories guided us to 3 of our most important sites, never would have shared that traditional knowledge with a researcher who approached Maya culture as an academic exercise rather than a living heritage. The auditorium erupted in applause. Elena had not only presented revolutionary discoveries, she had demonstrated that the humility and respect she had cultivated during her supposedly humble career had been essential to achieving those discoveries. After her presentation, Elena was surrounded by colleagues eager to discuss collaboration opportunities. Research universities that had never shown interest in her work were suddenly offering positions and resources. Publishers wanted book contracts, documentary filmmakers requested interviews, and graduate students begged to work on her team. Dr. James Morrison, who had initiated the whole adventure with his phone call 6 months earlier, found Elena during a break in the chaos. Elena, he said, grinning broadly, you realize what you've accomplished, don't you? You've just rewritten the history of science in the Americas. More than that, you've proven that the most important discoveries come from careful scholarship, not academic politics. Elena laughed. James, I'm the same person who was sitting alone in the community college cafeteria 6 months ago. The only thing that's changed is that people are finally paying attention to what the Maya were trying to tell us all along. That evening, Elena attended the reception in her honor, accepting congratulations from researchers who had spent decades studying the same culture she had quietly loved and respected. Dr. Patricia Harrison approached her near the end of the evening, looking somewhat embarrassed. Elena, Patricia said, I owe you an apology. 20 years ago, I thought you were making a mistake by taking that teaching position. I was wrong about a lot of things. Patricia, we all make the choices that seem right at the time, Elena replied graciously. The important thing is that Maya science is finally getting the recognition it deserves. But Patricia wasn't finished. No, Elena, that's not what I mean. You didn't just make different choices, you made better choices. While the rest of us were fighting over grants and publications, you were actually learning about the Maya. Your discoveries weren't lucky accidents. They were the result of decades of careful, respectful scholarship that none of us were willing to commit to. Elena appreciated Patricia's honesty, but she was more interested in talking about the future than rehashing the past. The real work is just beginning, Elena said. We've identified 12 more potential sites. If even half of them contain the kind of material we've found so far, we'll be studying Maya scientific achievements for the next 50 years. 3 weeks later, Elena stood once again in the Guatemala jungle, but this time as the director of an international research project funded by universities and institutions from around the world. The quiet lady sitting alone had become Dr. Elena Rodriguez, one of the most respected Maya scholars on Earth. Her team had grown to include researchers from 6 countries, graduate students from the world's best programs, and, most importantly, Maya community members whose traditional knowledge continued to guide the most important discoveries. Carlos Ixchel had become her co-director, ensuring that indigenous perspectives remained central to their work. Ana Gutierrez headed the field operations, and Miguel Santos was completing his doctoral dissertation on the mathematical inscriptions they continued to uncover. Elena's students at Riverside Community College had become celebrities in their own right, featured in news articles about how their humble professor had shocked the academic world. The college had established a scholarship program in Elena's name, supporting students who wanted to pursue archaeology and anthropology. As Elena stood in the newest excavation area where the team was uncovering evidence of Maya achievements in engineering that rivaled modern capabilities, she reflected on how dramatically her life had changed. The woman who had been invisible in university cafeterias was now featured on magazine covers and invited to speak at conferences around the world. But the most satisfying aspect of her newfound recognition wasn't the accolades or the prestigious appointments she was being offered. It was the opportunity to change how archaeology approached ancient cultures, especially indigenous civilizations that had been systematically underestimated by European-centered scholarship. Elena's discoveries had proven that sophisticated science hadn't begun with the Greeks or emerged during the European Renaissance. Mathematical and astronomical achievements that textbooks credited to European scholars had actually been developed centuries earlier by Maya researchers who had been dismissed as primitive by academic prejudice. The quiet lady sitting alone had done more than shock her colleagues. She had demonstrated that the most important archaeological discoveries came not from fame-seeking expeditions or well-funded projects, but from patient, respectful scholarship guided by genuine love for the cultures being studied. Elena's phone buzzed with a text message from the president of Stanford University, offering her a prestigious endowed chair and unlimited research funding. She smiled and put the phone away without responding. Tomorrow, she had more Maya astronomical calculations to decipher, more evidence to uncover of scientific achievements that would continue shocking the world. The quiet lady had found her voice, and she was using it to let the ancient Maya finally tell their own story of scientific brilliance that had been hidden in plain sight for over 1,000 years. Elena Rodriguez had become exactly what the world needed. An archaeologist who listened more than she spoke, who respected the cultures she studied, and who proved that the most revolutionary discoveries come from the most careful scholarship. The woman everyone had overlooked had changed everything anyone thought they knew about human scientific achievement, and she was just getting started.